Hello and welcome to Colonial Outcasts, the anti-imperialist, dirty leftist podcast that actually tolerates dissenting voices. And yeah, we're still workshopping the new tagline. It used to be the anti-imperialist podcast that your uncle will hate, but I've had to change it because a lot of y'all's uncles actually like this platform. So I'm just spitballing here, and not everything's going to be gold. So there's a lot going on right now. Apologies to the Patreon subscribers, but I don't think I'll have enough time for a live Q&A this week since Monday we covered the war in Ukraine. Yesterday, we did an operational breakdown episode of the IDF collapsing in Lebanon. Today, we're talking about Trump's Night of the Long Knives 2.0. Is he politicizing the military? And tomorrow, I'm interviewing a four-star general about the U.S. military recruitment crisis and the potential implementation of the draft. Busy week, but I'll make it up to y'all post-haste. The F Around Fridays video is still happening, though, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I'm your host, Greg Stoker. I'm joined by co-founder of this endeavor, Mark Wayne, who can only be with us for like half the episode, and by popular request, regular contributor, J Alfred, an Air Force Security Forces veteran and national security consultant in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. So today we're going to be talking about the growing fear of President-elect Trump purging the military and employing it on immigrants, protesters, and anyone he doesn't like. Essentially, that's the fear. Is it actually going to happen, and what does this mean going forward? Should be a lively convo, with J Alfred. Usually forces me out of my completely left-wing anarchist echo chamber. So strap in. We're going to start with the great liberal fear of Trump purging the military and becoming Orange Hitler 2.0. So just to give you a taste of what's going around on social media, it's how a lot of people consume their news and transmit information. So it's always worth checking in.
Order that would create a board to purge generals.
Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. This is the article they're going off of, and it was originally published in the Wall Street Journal.
June 30th, 1934, Hitler would embark on a multi-day campaign in which he would purge Nazi leadership of people he deemed too powerful or opponents of his. This would be called the Night of the Long Knives. He did this so that he could ensure there would be no checks and balances of him as he tried to enact the more extreme parts of his agenda. By July 3rd, hundreds of Yahtzee leaders would be dead or fleeing for their lives. I hate knowing history.
Hate knowing history right now. But look, before we get too alarmist, we have to recognize that Night of the Long Knives 2.0, if it happens, will not look like Night of the Long Knives 1.0. This Trump administration Third Reich comparison is almost about as clunky as trying to compare the U.S. empire to the Roman Empire. It's not completely accurate. The Western fascists of today don't exactly look like the Western fascists of the World War II era. Franco, Mussolini, Hitler, times have changed. There is no left-wing party. There's no left-wing party that they have to overthrow and kill. There's no longer any substantial threat to the capitalist system. After the culture war issues are burnt away, the Democrats and Republicans are wings of the same bird. And we'll be drilling down on that when we examine immigration, the mass Trumpian deportation order that was started under Obama, empowered by Clinton. But first, we have to acknowledge why people voted for him. This is where we're going to start and anchor the conversation. Leftists will generally focus more on how the Democrats have abandoned the working class, and liberals will blame the same racism and misogyny and transphobia that has always existed. And all of these things are factors, and whether this is true or not, Trump is seen as a political disruptor. I view his campaign as a repudiation of the smug elite establishment embodied by the Democrats, and a repudiation of the, quote, woke social political movements of the past decade, like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, DEI, etc. Basically make America great again, back to the time before the woke mind virus. So, J. Alfred, to anchor this impending conversation, an expansive question. Why did so many people vote for Trump? Why did he, as a Republican, win the popular vote, which hasn't happened in a very long time? And it seems like most of the American voting public wants all these things to happen.
Sure. So I'll give you my anecdotal experience. I worked indirectly for the Harris campaign. I was hired as a security consultant for what they were doing in some of the battleground states, specifically in Michigan and in Milwaukee. When I got to Detroit specifically, I was shocked, to say the least. If people who are listening to this podcast have never been to Detroit, the people are absolutely amazing. The buildings, the architecture, you could see what it used to be. And it was also a horror show because of what it used to be. You could see that it used to be a place that was an economic engine of America. And now it's hollowed out. While I was in Detroit, I was there with the Harris campaign team that were canvassing the ground for a Get Out the Vote event. And as I'm there, I'm looking at the people that are coming. And myself, there were other media luminaries like Angela Rye. She was there. I got a chance to speak to her and basically tell her I'm one of the disaffected people that is very happy that if Trump wins, one, because of the genocide that's going on in Palestine, and also because the policies that the Biden administration and the Harris now administration is spearheading. In talking to the people and listening to them, I was shocked. Again, if you are framing this from an identity politics standpoint, these are an overwhelming, probably 98% of them were African Americans and people of color. They were coming there saying, we're voting for Trump. We're just here for a free concert and to get free stuff. The crystallizing moment in Detroit for me, where I said, oh my gosh, she's not going to win. If you can imagine standing in the middle of a city center, because that's where we were in New Center, Detroit, there was an old black man with a walker coming across the street. And you'll forgive me, I'm going to use his language that he decided to issue. He said, I don't give a shit what you guys are offering. I'm voting for Trump. Myself and two other white guys, we looked at each other and we were like, yeah, she's going to lose. I went to Michigan, or excuse me, I went to Milwaukee afterwards. And I had to do the same setup for a concert event. This time we were at downtown Milwaukee, right across the street from basically where the Milwaukee Bucks play. The same thing was happening again, this time with an even larger crowd. And all I could say was, holy shit, she's going to lose. There's no way that she wins this. And again, broken clock could be right at least twice a day, right? Mm-hmm. My anecdotal experience in Detroit and my experience in Milwaukee let me know what I was feeling, having been to Texas, having been to New York, having been to LA since she started running her campaign. And people, for some reason, when you get to talking to them privately and you get to disarm them, Trump is like McDonald's. They know that it's bad for you, but he's that McFlurry and apple pie that you're going to eat in your car in the middle of the night when nobody's looking and you're going to love it. So does he bring some bad elements? Absolutely. But they were going to vote for him because, well, when you get into that booth, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. Nobody's watching you. You get to cast your vote. And to my liberal friends that are out there, look at yourselves amongst yourselves, because the people that are saying that they would never vote for Trump, statistically, some of your friends voted for him for whatever their rhyme or reason is. So I think it's time to depart from the typical orthodoxies and unpack why people really want Trump to win. And it's not because they like him. It's because they hate the system that Trump talks about and is against also. The very same system that the Harris administration, Biden administration has been in control of and have not used to benefit the general masses.
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Do you remember the conversation you and I had, Greg, about this, where my impression of minorities is because me and Greg got into somewhat of a debate about this, where polling was showing support for Kamala Harris amongst minorities, but I don't trust those pollings because they come from big media companies that are ultimately owned by white supremacist Democrats and liberals. And the only meter and barometer I have is anecdotal conversations, like you just said, with Black people. I talk with a lot of Black people about this, and I trust them, and I can only base my perception on these conversations and not on some polling data, which could have been skewed because I don't know the sampling size. I don't know the regions in which they
No, keep going. Sorry, we got a phone call.
well, I don't
Yeah,
remember what I was saying.
No, like
There goes my ADHD again. I'm like,
oh no. Okay.
Okay, so that was our conversation, JP, with Greg. This is when Greg was of the opinion that Harris would probably win, and I was like, "What?" And he was basing it on polling data.
I was saying that they thought I said from the beginning Harris wasn't going to win. I said from the beginning Trump was going to win. I was saying that the media, the establishment media was saying Harris has this huge like honeymoon phase and she's going to blow Trump out of the water. I was like, dude, there's 3 months left in this election. Like, what are you even talking about?
I must have misremembered the conversation, but either way, my impression was, polling data, and I'm like, polling data has always been wrong in every single election. In the past 4 elections, I believe, polling data was completely skewed.
Okay, yeah. Wrong. So basically, just to like move on and establish, like there are very real reasons that people voted for Trump, and we have to remember that this is not an aberration. A lot of people, at least, weren't concerned enough about Trump or supported his policies or what he represents enough for him to win the popular vote, which Republicans generally never do. And of course, if I was going to be like a lot of, my more liberal colleagues, I would say to you, J Alfred, like, how could you support like Trump? Like, you're of Haitian descent. What did he say about during the debate? Like, how could you even countenance that? And of course, it's basically, yeah.
So for example, I don't think Trump was wrong, and I think I spoke to you privately about this. Trump wasn't wrong when he said that Haiti's a shithole country. My problem with what Trump says is that he doesn't say why Haiti's a shithole country. He doesn't say why or how the United States embarked on a foreign policy for the last 60 to 70 years that absolutely destroyed Haiti economically. There was an embargo around Haiti, that they overthrew every single elected president in Haiti. Trump doesn't say why Haiti's a shithole country, and that's the problem that I have with him. So by him calling it that, yeah, I can say that, yeah, he's right. If a shithole country involves having, no services, no actual legal framework in place by the standards and metrics of the so-called United States or the so-called first world country, sure, Trump's not wrong. But what he's dead wrong is where he doesn't elaborate to his supporters why Haiti's a shithole country. And it's specifically because of the United States. Because the average American that, every year is star-spangled awesome when they're watching a football game, they don't understand that the present-day United States is constituted the way that it is because of Haiti. They don't understand that, they don't know it, they don't learn it in their history books. So there needs to be an education piece and there needs to be an elaboration piece on Trump's part. But I don't think that you're going to be able to teach an old dog new tricks in this case.
Right. And so anyways, after running the worst campaign that I can recall, the Harris campaign, not having an actual primary for the DNC, whole lot of problems. We are now stuck with Trump. And he's saying some pretty radical and disturbing things in terms of dismantling certain systems, some of which are valid. We're going to start by talking about the purging of the military. First of all, we're going to play this video from MSNBC based off of a Wall Street Journal article. And there has been, and then we're going to look at some military literature that actually talks for structural decision-making and command hierarchy issues that actually the general staff, general officers in the military need to be reduced. So let's just take this one step at a time.
Some Really amazing new reporting in the Wall Street Journal that we just got. I'm going to share it with all of you for your reaction. Wall Street Journal just dropped a story under this headline, quote, Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. The panel could upend the military review process and raise concerns about the politicization of the military. Quote, the Trump transition team is considering a draft executive order that establishes a warrior board of retired senior military personnel with the power to review 3- and 4-star officers and to recommend removals of any deemed unfit for leadership. If Trump approves the order, it could fast-track the removal of generals and admirals found to be lacking in requisite leadership qualities, according to a draft of the order reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. But it could also create a chilling effect on top military officers, given the president-elect's past vow to fire woke generals, referring to officers seen as promoting diversity in the ranks at the expense of military readiness. I don't know if Paul Rieckhoff had a window into this or was just prescient, but he warned of a purge yesterday. That is literally the headline in the Wall Street Journal today. Sarah Matthews, this feels like something I know you've talked about, being sent out to lie and refute the story about Donald Trump believing that the men and women who die serving the country are suckers and losers, when it was first reported in the Atlantic and then confirmed by General John Kelly in a statement and then in his own voice in a tape with the New York Times ahead of the election. Just how vexing was it to Donald Trump that he couldn't get the military to heel to his commands and wishes?
Yeah, I do think this is an issue that has long perplexed him. We know that from John Kelly in his interview that he did with the New York Times, that John Kelly said that Trump wanted generals like Hitler's. He wants people who will carry out every wish and demand of his and receive zero pushback. And so hearing about this potential draft executive order is obviously alarming and concerning. This is something that I was raising the alarm about, of how he would reshape our government and reshape it and to fit him and his vision. And so.
Okay, so enough of that. What are your takes on this? Because you had an interesting perspective that I hadn't considered when we were talking on the phone right before this episode.
So people are not going to like this.
Okay.
I'm in full support of what he's doing. And I'm going to elaborate and explain to you what I actually support. The quote unquote woke piece, it's the noise. I rather focus on the substance.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the context that I want to frame it in. You have a Department of Defense that has never passed an audit once. It loses or cannot account for billions upon billions of dollars. You have generals who lied to him about Syria, who lied to him about about our force posture in other nations in covert action. You have a general staff that summarily does what they want and is unaccountable, essentially, and hides under the obscurity of national defense. Those generals need to go. Are we going to get rid of possibly some good people? Yes. The system is the larger problem. It is a systemic failure at the level of DOD, and it needs to be eradicated and cleaned up. No one here argues that the current system is functioning properly. We can all agree that it's not. We can agree, all of us collectively for the most part, that this whole woke, this nebulous term that could mean anything just about, is probably the wrong way to go about doing things. But I don't think from a sales standpoint, which is what he's doing, he's trying to sell this, it wouldn't go positively with his national security establishment support, the war hawks of his support base that want perpetual war everywhere. I don't think it would go well over with them if he said, listen, I don't like our force posture around the world. We're going to detract and we're going to defund. It wouldn't go over well. I think we can agree to that. Mm-hmm. So he has to pick between the two that he's going to disappoint. Is he going to disappoint the people that are already disappointed in him? Or is he going to disappoint the people that genuinely support him and brought him into office? So in my opinion, and having talked to certain key people, I think for the most part, he's going to wrap up all of these absolutely treasonous people that are within the national defense apparatus, and he's going to roll them up within that whole woke rollout posture that he wants to eliminate. Good or bad, it needs to be done. because staying in the current position that we're in right now is giving us the result that we've gotten over the last 20 years that have caused you and I, Greg, to carry the caskets of our men onto C-130s. And I don't want to deal with that anymore. I've gone to enough Patriot details, Greg. So if this is the conduit or the vehicle that we have to use to achieve our goal, it's not the one that we want to ride in, but it's the one that we have. And we don't have a choice at this point. We've come to that point. So I'm trying my best to issue a pragmatic statement. It's not necessarily that I'm in full support. I can acknowledge the negatives. But the question fundamentally becomes, when we ask ourselves, do the negatives outweigh the positives? And in this case, this one specific case, I think the positives far outweigh it.
Question for you, JP, real quick. Taking in everything you just said, the failings of the generals and the corruption and just the overall incompetence of the military apparatus and the generals, is it possible, though, that he is using those failures and using this idea of getting rid of the dead flesh in the military as a cover for something else, like kind of using the momentum and the disgruntled nature of what Americans feel about our military and its and all the shortcomings, and then using that kind of like as a cover for something else that he's trying to do. You know, it's kind of like it's the same thing, like say Adolf Hitler. I know it's a terrible analogy, but Adolf Hitler used socioeconomic conditions of Germans, and said, okay, I'm going to take care of this. Here's what I'm doing. And then shifting that momentum for another reason, which is what I'm worried about.
Sure. So I'm in full agreement. What I just articulated, you just synthesized and articulated a little bit better. I believe that the whole woke generals process and getting rid of them, I believe that there's a backdrop to it that's more important that he is attempting to do. And he has to use the woke general cover up in order to be able to do it. Now, the point of this because this is the part of me that is, whether it's Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, I don't trust government at all. So this is the portion that I think that we need to be careful of. It's what we don't see that we need to definitely be concerned about. So it's trust but verify, but it very much is, he could usher in total and complete fascism. However, Trump would not be the catalyst to it. It's not because it's Trump that's in office that we now have some type of fascistic posture within our government / military. Trump is not the one to do that, because he cannot both be stupid and smart all at the same time. It takes a team. So if we are saying that fascism is here, then we also have to say that this is a systemic issue. It is not just a singular issue that is held on one individual's shoulders, because at the same time, like I just said, he cannot both be smart and stupid at the same time. We have to make our choice.
He's just a mascot for it.
Correct. He's just the mascot for it. There is a systemic problem that exists. And now the question becomes, will he help, or will he help correct that system that he identified? There is a portion of self-reflection that's taken place. Again, if you take him to his word and what the statements are that he said, when he first came into office, he didn't know what he was doing. He listened to the people that he shouldn't have listened to, but this go around, he's not going to. Again, this is from Bobby Kennedy, which is probably the top reason as to why I would say and position myself in support of him, which is what a lot of people support him for. It's because he had Bobby Kennedy, because he had people like Tulsi Gabbard. Those are the two linchpins that, in my opinion, put him over the top. So when you look at the ability to try to make systemic change, which we all agree needs to happen at a food level, at an agricultural level, at an industrial level, at a military defense level, those changes need to occur. So the question becomes, when we ask ourselves, do we go with 100% of nothing, which is zero, or do we take what we can get, even if it's 10%? I'd rather take that 10% than have 100% of zero. That doesn't make sense. That's not a good deal.
Yeah, and just for some context for the audience, this idea of cutting out, getting rid of general officers has been in military literature and been discussed in military literature for decades now. I'm pulling up an article real quick. I'm just going to read the intro synopsis. This is from National Defense University Press. from October 1st, 2017 by Gregory C. McCarthy, U.S. Colonel U.S. Marine Corps. Are there too many general officers in today's military? The argument has been similar for a long time. There are approximately 900 active duty general flag officers. So generals and admirals today of 1.3 million troops. This ratio of one general flag officer for every 1,400 troops. During World War II, an admittedly different era, there were more than 2,000 general officers for a little more than 12 million American troops. That's one general per 6,000 troops. This development represents what we call rank creep that does not enhance mission success, but clutters the chain of command, adds bureaucratic layers to decisions, and costs taxpayers additional money from funding higher pay grades to fill those positions. As end strength fluctuates, force structure and strength projections for the next decade show the uniformed services maintaining substantial excess capacity at senior ranks. Although historical numbers are inexact guides and future threats could radically change circumstances, the case for reduction is strong. The Department of Defense should reduce the numbers, billets, and percent of general flag officers in each service to increase efficiency, streamline decision-making, achieve modest cost saving, and enhance accountability of decision-making. So I just wanted to, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because I follow a lot of like liberal influencer accounts. And they will just be like, he's going to do a purge. It's like, this has been talked about in military circles for decades too. Like you have to acknowledge that.
So in 2005, when I was still in, I remember my commander, they were going through the first rift in the Air Force. And the force posture was that there was a general malaise that was going on within the lower ranks from 05 and below, right? At this level, if you take that article into account, fast forward 20 years later, they're saying that there's an overweighted bureaucracy, which there is. We haven't gotten more efficient. So when I'm hired as a consultant, one of the things that they do is tell me, look at the lay of the land. The first thing I do, I follow the numbers. I look at the money. Since the war on terror, since the GWAT has occurred, we were fighting battles in 3 different wars and multiple smaller level engagements in different areas of the world. We have since detracted. Why has the number of general flag officers increased? Why has the budget of the Pentagon increased? It doesn't make mathematical sense. We are not getting our bang for our buck. So if you decide to remove the majority of those general flag officers, let's just say from the 900, you reduce it down, let's say you reduce it by 2/3. You're now at 300. Okay. Everybody has a financial motive and incentive. Take the money that you save, diffuse that amongst the ranks, increase their pay grades, increase their pay levels, make them work for their money. Not saying that they don't already, but you provide that level of financial incentive. There's already the emotional incentive that exists because they decided to serve their country, put the uniform on every day. You actually save money and create a level of efficiency that you otherwise clearly don't have now. The other elephant in the room that nobody wants to account for or talk about is going to be the contractors. Booz Allen Hamilton, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and the others, they are going to have to take a massive downturn. Everybody can go quit their job, go be a teacher, go open up a coffee shop. I really don't care. But for right now, every dollar that we spend on defense spending is a dollar that we take out for social spending. And again, Greg, I've told you my position philosophically. I'm a registered Republican. I find it weird that we are willing to go and defend the American way of life and Americans abroad, but we let them die in the streets from preventable diseases. I find that to be weird. It doesn't make sense. It's perverse. We need a change in policy. I don't care what the change is at this point, but it can't be this. You might not like the way Trump is doing it. I get it. He is being a hatchet right now. He's not being a scalpel. However, we can all agree that the cancer exists. We can go and do the fine tuning afterwards, but for right now, I am in full support of abolishing the majority of the general staff, which has literally displayed a level of moral cowardice. Because if there was any type of contrition in them, what's happening in Palestine right now, what's happening abroad in these other low intensity conflicts, they would stand up and say that it's wrong. And you don't see that happening. So I'm not going to give them grace or stand by them and support them and rally to their defense. Cut away. Cut away.
Okay.
So the question would remain then, with the cutting, the top cutting of these generals, would it also translate into cutting of contracts with defense companies
Yes.
like Lockheed Martin? That
Yes.
is going to be the true test of Trump. It's like, okay, you're making these changes. Are you going to cut back on the war machine? Are you going to cut back on the military-industrial complex? If he doesn't,
he's not an anti-war candidate. That's what I think. That's what the biggest problem I have with his base is that they actually see him as an anti-war candidate. He's surrounding himself with all of these neocon war hawks. Thankfully, he didn't reappoint Mike Pompeo to the cabinet, the ex-director of the CIA, who's an evangelical Zionist war hawk. But he's saying that we need to strike Iran. He's no longer saying like, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine right when I get to office. He's kind of proposing, the last thing he floated was like a 20-year frozen conflict around the Ukrainian border, creating an essentially a Korean style demilitarized zone. And he wants to let Israel finish the job. I mean, yes, he might be trying to like cut general officers, but I don't see him as an anti-war candidate, and I don't see him as a non-pro corporate candidate. Literally, he put Elon Musk, the anarcho-capitalist idiot, in charge of the Office of Government Efficiency. So, yeah, I mean, there is this idea that he's a hatchet, but I think he's serving his own interests and the interests of the system that he's willing to be a part of, and he's not really going to disrupt at all.
Greg, let's unpack what you just said. And I'm sorry to reduce it to this binary option.
Okay.
Which one would you prefer? He's not anti-war like me and you. He's not. We can't expect that. So it goes back to my original example. Do you get 100% of 0, or do you get 50% of 100? You have a choice here. This is legitimately the choice that's before you. And you're not going to, I think that you and I will agree, getting 100% of 0 is not good. And what we would have gotten is 100% of 0 with Biden and Harris. Even if you take into account political statements and rhetoric, look at what they've done. They've sent ATACMS missiles, and now Ukraine is lobbing missiles across the border to Russia. They have furthered the war conflict. Their position on Palestine, they could have changed that. It could have been, temporarily, it's a political thing. You know what? After the election, when we win, we'll change our posture. What did they do? They doubled down. So they are ineffective and they're wrong. So that in that case, we get 100% of 0. With Trump, however, again, this, for those that are listening, I'm not saying that it is a beacon of support that I'm issuing. But what we have to make sure that we don't do is that we stay siloed and listen to our own echo chambers. It doesn't make sense. So I'm issuing a contrarian statement. In his statement record that he's issued, he is actually doubling down on what he has said prior to the election. I'm going to end this war. And to your credit and to your point that you just made, have some type of DMZ zone around the Ukrainian area. I've been to Korea. I've been to the DMZ. I've been to Chegu. I've been to Osan Air Force Base. I know what that's like over there. If that is the case, what you see Trump doing, what the result of that from a level of private industry is, he's feeding a bit of red meat. He cannot go cold turkey and cut them off. He just can't. It will cause anarchy within the defense establishment. And anarchy and trying to organize that from an industrial standpoint and from just a general corporate organizational structure, you don't want that. You want to have a managed decline. So if I've got to crash this plane, I don't want to crash the plane where everybody dies. I want to have a managed decline where I end up crashing into the Hudson River like Sully and everybody survives, or everybody survives to the best of the ability. In this case, with what he's proposing for Ukraine, you're still able to feed the industrial base of Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So what ends up happening there, instead of getting 100% of what they were normally going to get, they have a managed decline. This year, you're going to get 75. The year after, you're going to get 50. The year after, you're going to get probably 35. So it's a managed financial decline of what the industrial base will be able to get. they're not going to get what they used to. They
Unless it's
cannot
reshifted to different sectors. That's
Correct.
possible
It
too,
has to
where
be.
the funding could not go to necessarily directly to Ukraine, but it could be redirected for some homeland defense apparatus, or
Exactly.
even upping the weapons that we give to Israel for the genocide. We
I
don't
don't
know.
I don't disagree with you. In what you're mentioning right now, there's going to be a shift of the defense budget. One of the shifts that I'm going through right now is I'm consulting for a company where they're going to be asked to do domestic operations in terms of internment camps, essentially.
This is where I wanted to talk to you, where I wanted to get to. Definitely an interesting take on Trump's actions.
He's bringing the war home. He's essentially
Yes.
bringing the war home. Instead of fighting abroad, Trump is saying the war is actually within. We might not agree with who he believes is the enemy, per se, but he is bringing the war at home, and he is going to turn, for lack of a better term, he's going to turn the U.S. military on its citizens, essentially, or on the countrymen, because the people that he's saying that he's going to target are going to be the criminals, the people who violate their visas, et cetera, and get them out of the country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to, before we get into this, let's just say what he said. First of all, the big campaign talking point is like, we're going to target criminals, visa violators, and basically just start there. It doesn't have an end stage beyond like, we're going to get rid of all the millions and deport them. You have Tom Homan, who we're going to talk about, was actually appointed under Obama. So it's Obama's deporter in chief, essentially, that's coming back under Trump to implement this policy. But, and of course, I follow a lot of liberal accounts, and they're like, they're going to deport all these millions of people. And I'm like, how? That's like nearly $1 trillion project. Illegal immigrants and my undocumented workers pay an obscene amount of tax, obscene amount of money into the tax base. Also, like, they would shrink the GDP by like $2 trillion a year. That's through independent estimates. So I don't see how it's feasible, but also like this is his main campaign talking point. Like, isn't he going to be expected to go through with this?
Sure. So what you're going to end up seeing, and all of these dots are interconnected, you will send a massive supply shock to the system if you decide to do that. Mm-hmm. In his rhetoric alone, one of the key things that I want to look for at the end of December is look at CFPP's numbers in terms of the immigration numbers, in terms of the number of border crossings, how that's influenced prior to Trump taking office. So are people crossing the border en masse still, or is there an exfiltration? If there's an exfiltration that's occurring, that tells me one thing from an economic standpoint. That tells me that legal, hardworking immigrants who come here are saying, I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather go back to my home country rather than get rolled up into some administrative process that could potentially make it so that I'm never able to come back, which now puts Bobby Kennedy in jeopardy. Because remember, all of these dots are interconnected. The way that I'm positioning this is every single person who comes here is legal, authorized, and is a hard worker. I'm not talking about the criminal element yet, okay? So what you're going to do is send a supply shock, because American workers are not working for Smithfield. Those jobs are 90% in the slaughterhouses. They are 90% taken on by visa workers who come abroad. The people in the fields in California, in your almond fields, in your green peppers, in your strawberry fields, in your orange fields in Florida, those are visa workers that come on temporary visa status. The next thing that you're going to have to deal with, well, what happens when you remove a labor force of over 1 million people? What do you think is going to happen to Social Security? Because those people pay into a system that they'll never benefit from. So there's supply shocks cascading at every single level that they are going to have to account for. The problem with what he's saying is the rhetoric that he's using. Because the rhetoric that the media or the liberal apparatus within MSNBC is, they say, anybody who doesn't speak English, who came here abroad, you're dreamers, you're going to be kicked out. What he's saying specifically is those people that have criminal records, those people that have been adjudicated by the law, those people who have come here illegally, those are the first to go. Everybody else will worry about afterwards. Again, this is what he's saying. What's going to happen is going to probably be a different story, potentially. But what we can guarantee is that the lying media will take one specific case, because to say that it's going to operate under perfection would be false. You're going to have people rolled up on the nightly news that you're going to see families being put into ICE vehicles, families being arrested and deported. But the problem that occurs is families were being withheld or held in detention centers and exported out of here under Obama. It was his policies that gave way to what you see now before Trump. So we can sit here and we can condemn Trump, rightfully so, for how he goes about doing it. But I'd rather be upset and condemn the person who allowed him to do it, who ushered him the ability to be able to do it, and that's Barack Obama.
Well, this is why it's so bizarre as far as Trump trying to portray himself as being like an alternative to Democrats, because like Greg said, Thomas Homan, he was, acting director of ICE during Obama. And one of the main criticisms of Homan was the fact that he was engaged in family separation, the policy season act to separate families. And out of the result of that, you had 3,000 children who were separated. And a big talking point that the right wing uses is that, we have to put a cap on this illegal immigration because of child trafficking. Well, because of that child separation, a lot of children were separated from their families and wound up being sexually molested and being a large number of cases of psychological trauma as a result of them being separated from their families. And Homan was part of that, and that was Obama. So for Trump to bring the Obama doctrine back, it's just bizarre to me, because, and I don't think that his base really realizes that, because they never look into these things. Trump supporters rarely, for the most part, look into.
They care about the end result. They care
exactly. They care about the flashy bullet points that Trump says, and not making the connection between Obama and what he's doing now.
Well, hang on. If we're really curious about this and where it comes from, we have to accept this. You can't talk about mass deportation without talking about Clinton, Bush, and Obama. The draconian movement that we're seeing under Biden, which will probably get worse under Trump, did not fall out of the sky. It took years and years of bipartisan xenophobic collaboration. Clinton and Bush set up the deportation machine, and Obama used it and took it further than ever before. Being apathetic during those years doesn't change the relentless terror that occurred. Where we are now is only shocking if you weren't paying attention. And of course, liberals just woke up from brunch after 4 years and they're like, oh, Trump's president. Where did this happen? So Obama was called the deporter in chief. It will take an effort to outdo what occurred under his presidency. But why do you think Trump is tapping someone from his administration? Nothing about any of this is surprising. Like Clinton's 1996 illegal immigration reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, Bush's focus on border security, and Obama's record on deportations all played a role in shaping this current situation. It's a complex issue with deep roots in both parties' past policies. So to blame this all on Trump, I mean, I hate Trump, but to blame it all on him is absurd. It's intellectually dishonest.
Ironically, Bush was the most friendly to immigrants from his policies, and I remember the days when Bush was criticized by Democrats because he was so lax on immigrants. I don't know if you guys remember those days, but they're building on each other. It just appears that the the Democratic president, and then the Republican president after him they just build on each other with these draconian policies, like Greg said.
You have what Greg just said is 100% accurate. I'm referencing Obama only because I'm thinking about our viewer base and what their historical framework is going to be. Everybody just about remembers Obama to a certain extent. However, when you peel back the onion even more, and we go to Clinton with their WTO agreements, when you go to Bush and the way that, as you just said, that he was very much pro-immigration to an extent, he allowed it to happen. It's not that he was pro-immigration. It's something that Greg would probably say. He was pro-capitalist class. The capitalist class requires migration that you've seen before you now in order to have lower prices, maximum profits. It's a money issue.
Yep.
Fundamentally simple to understand. And if you want to understand it even more, when you go to McDonald's, there's a reason why you can get a cheeseburger for $1.29, but when you go to the supermarket, a green bell pepper is $3.25. There's a reason for that. There's a level of subsidy that's provided to certain industry that is directly backed by the immigrant class, whereas other industries don't necessarily get them. And it's brought us to where we are at today. So it is a uni-party issue. This is not a left versus right. This is the uni-party in full effect. They have a vested interest to make sure that it's basically WWF. They want to put on the illusion that this is real, but in actuality, it's not. And now the danger of this is for the last 25 years, at its minimum, you've had this kabuki theater that's gone on. And now they're saying, oh shit, we just elected Donald Trump. And he's seeing that, well, he's looked behind the curtain and he's calling bullshit. And now the capitalist class is running scared. So,
well, at least the capitalist interests that are opposed to him. There's plenty of capitalist backing.
Correct. He does. To say that it's a uni party in the capitalist class would be wrong. There are people that have a vested interest in seeing him do what he does. I agree with you. But one thing that, again, I can be mad at the idiot with a gun. I'm going to be mad at the person who gave him the gun. And in this case, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, they are directly to blame. They flat out, they are 100% to blame. And like you said, if you have this conversation without blaming them also, you're gaslighting and you're being ideologically inconsistent.
You know, I think another example of this intellectual dishonesty that we're seeing coming from like liberal media, at least. I mean, Fox is this whole thing. I don't even want to get into the conservative establishment media, but like from like MSNBC and stuff, they're like, Trump's gonna, put homeless people in camps. And it's like, all right, this is from the Invisible People, an unhoused person NGO. Government sanctioned homeless encampments are an ominous solution, and they're like, Trump's going to do these concentration camps. Yeah, well, this article's from 2023. All right, guys. And here's the thing about this. Please do not fall for this. What they're describing is an open air prison camp. And while it would be difficult for the federal government to do this directly, what's truly terrifying is that Trump is basically saying the same things about homeless people as Governor Gavin Newsom is in California. This isn't an idea unique to Trump. Democrats in California, for instance, have been salivating at the idea of shipping unhoused people from where we can see them into the desert for a long time. The very well-funded landlord lobby has spent a lot of money in marketing the idea that people on the streets who drowned under the pressure of sky-high rents are personally flawed. No reflection of the cruelty of our housing market is needed. And this is a bipartisan idea to have done this.
I mean, to frame this for numerical purposes for people, the money that we are about to spend this year alone, we can literally, this is not an exaggeration, it's not my opinion, it's not up for anybody's debate. We could literally provide housing for every single person in America. So this problem that we're seeing that Trump is supposedly looking to solve, it's solvable at a financial level, but who's going to get the money and who's going to get the result are going to be two different things. Because the result of this is going to be, as you just recently seen a couple of months ago with the criminalization of being homeless in the Supreme Court cases, okay? What you've seen is Gavin Newsom now all of a sudden deciding that after spending billions of dollars and it going nowhere and only I think it was 7 or 8 buildings being built in California, after all of this money spent, he's now deciding somehow that he's going to start to clean up areas of California where gross homelessness exists. But again, that's only solving one part of the problem. This is where my Republican hat, I am very much a Bernie Sanders supporter in this case. You cannot address homelessness without addressing the financial causes of what causes homelessness, and that's people's pay. It is fundamentally doesn't make sense for me to give you a house, but now you can't afford it.
Well,
I
not to
have
mention,
do both.
one of the key things that is left out of the conversation in regards to Trump and the housing market and everything is that 40% of homes, single family homes, are owned by Blackstone. They were bought up by Blackstone during COVID. During the COVID shutdown, there
It's
was
a
a mass
monopoly.
buy-off, and nobody will address that. Trump won't address it. The Democrats won't address it. But I always come back to that. I always come back to that fact that Blackstone owns. That's almost half of single family
Blackstone?
homes. That's Blackstone it's a
Oh
subsidiary
yeah,
of BlackRock.
sorry,
So
sorry. Yeah.
Blackstone, for those of you guys who don't know, they're kind of like the umbrella for a lot of other real estate companies that are like shell companies that all go up the top to the pyramid, ultimately to BlackRock. But the point is,
It's a violation. It's a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's fundamentally that.
Nobody, not even leftist talking points, liberal talking points, conservative talking points, Trump, Kamala, anybody will address the fact that almost half of American homes are owned by one corporation. They are overbid. So that alone creates a housing shortage. That alone creates the price, causes the prices to go up. And you compound that with the increase of the interest rates. It's the perfect storm for homelessness. And you got the mental health crisis. You got the drug addiction epidemic. You combine all that, and it's a perfect soup for the housing market. But nobody will address the Blackstone issue because, again, that's the master of most of these politicians. They're not going to go against the hand that feeds them, And I got to go. I gotta do a hard out real quick, but I want to JP. I would love to do this again with you. I want to talk with you more on this. Really appreciate hearing you. I want to leave this with this when it comes to real quick. If it comes to the essence of deportation, just an appeal to conservative people in the conservative world. That I know that one thing that the right and the left do share in common, Republicans, Democrats, is the care of children, no matter what legal status, no matter what ethnicity, no matter what their situation is, we care about children. But I need to remind everybody that any attempts to deport or to separate families will ultimately lead to mass child abuse. And just to give you a quick statistic, between 2014 and 2018, the Office of Refugee Resettlement received 4,500 allegations of sexual abuse or harassment involving unaccompanied minors in U.S. custody. So keep that in mind whenever you try to buy into any sentiments of deportation or rounding up immigrants, no matter how much the issue is inflamed in the media. That is something that both sides can share. And I'll leave it on that bridge. That being said, JP, love your work. You're a fan favorite in our podcast, and I wish I could do this again with you when I'm not on a rush.
No worries.
Freaking Greg and his backward schedule and delays and shit. All right.
No worries.
All right. Love you, Greg. Love you, JP.
Right.
Y'all be
Take care, man. Take care. It's a pleasure.
See you Friday. All right. So, yeah, it's just, I do understand that a lot of people see Trump as a political disruptor. He is. His cabinet choices, from my perspective, are just insane. Like Peter Hegseth as SecDef, a dude who wears pit viper sunglasses and sells ammunition on social media. He was only a major.
If I could think of one thing, it's to listen to the speech. And anybody who's listening to this, go on YouTube and listen. Type in Chris Hedges' best speeches, where he talks about the Snopes. If anybody has ever read this book, it's about a family that it's an incestuous family that basically has sex with farm animals, and they engage in the illusion of spectacle. It's the illusion of spectacle that you see before you right now. Just look at who he's putting in these positions. That tells me one of two things. It's either to guarantee chaos, or these are just the people that he's parading in front of you to get you to focus on the glitter while he focuses on the gold of what he's going to actually do. Because between you and I, or anybody who's not listening to regular conventional media, I think we can agree that Pete Hegseth is not the choice for DOD or the choice to even be the mailman. Period.
I mean, I was talking to a general officer yesterday, who I'm going to interview tomorrow, and he's like reading Peter Hegseth's book right now, and he's like kind of horrified. It's called like The War on Warriors. Yeah,
He's a
it's
fucking idiot.
yeah.
There's no other way to put it. And I'm sorry to say that. He's a fucking idiot. Like, he's not the person that should be responsible for DOD at all under any circumstances. That's number one. Number two, he's just the fall guy, in my opinion. When you look at it, he is going to be the person. And if I'm Trump and I'm used to, let's say, manipulation of some sort, he's going to be the person that I tell, yeah, you're in charge of this. But in actuality, you're really not. It's what's happening behind the curtain that we need to be concerned with, not what's happening in front. What's happening in front is just the kabuki theater. What we are missing is going to be what's happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, what I wanted to just point out real quick, the Matt Gaetz appointment, he's not going to be in charge of the Justice Department. He's not going to get confirmed. This is just smoke and mirrors.
But you need to remember something. Trump has the ability to make recess appointments, number one. He has the ability to recess both houses of Congress. So he can make sure that these appointments go through temporarily for at least the next, 17, 18 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that still allows and affords a massive level of quote unquote damage. And that's assuming that he does things nefariously, but assuming that he does things justly and that he does remove the so-called corruption from the system, right? Is that really a bad thing? We need to ask ourselves. Is it really a bad thing to put Matt Gaetz responsible for DOJ? Considering this, and this is the framework that I want to have, it's not to support Matt Gaetz. It's to get the listeners to critically think. One of the tools that the apparatus uses is, we know that they use honeypots. We know that they use people like Jeffrey Epstein to get you involved with minors and whatnot. These allegations about Matt Gaetz have been going on for the last 2 years, if not more. And you mean to tell me you've never concluded an investigation? Why is that? Matt Gaetz has been a vocal critic. Nobody in Congress likes him, just about, with the exception of a few people. He's been an absolute vocal critic. And again, it's not a support for Matt Gaetz. It's fundamentally not. What it's saying is, I don't trust the system more than I do Matt Gaetz. I don't trust the FBI more than I do Matt Gaetz. The FBI, which was instrumental in the assassination of political leaders, that has summarily jailed people unconstitutionally, that has engaged in fraud. I don't trust that organization. There's a systemic failure there that exists. So the question becomes, if you have to use Matt Gaetz to clean up this larger problem, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because we can agree that nobody's perfect, one. Two, we can agree already that Matt Gaetz is not the person that we would want responsible for the DOJ, but he's what we have right now. So what do? Again, back to the original example, 100% of nothing, or do I settle with maybe 10% of something? I don't know what that something is yet, but I know the other one, I was going to get a big fat zero.
And I think that's why so many people showed out for Trump, and a lot of people just didn't vote. My concern is that last bit of the comment you made. You're not sure what that something is. Well, that something could actually be a lot worse than what we
worse. I don't disagree with you. I agree 100%. There's no daylight there. I agree with you. My question is this: what do we do? Because doing nothing isn't an option. Well, it's just not.
I think the concern is he'll usher in. It's going to happen under Dems. You know, the cop cities. All went in there.
Greg, he's not going to. Let's be clear. He's not going to usher anything that wasn't already in motion to be ushered in. Period.
Yeah.
He's just not. In the things that I mentioned in regards to immigration, Trump is not the problem. It is the people that allowed Trump to do this that are the problem. Because again, you can go all the way back to Jose Padilla. Jose Padilla, he was a gentleman that was convicted under the first GWAT around 2006 or so. He was held in detention. He was held in detention under the Bush administration without trial. What ended up happening, they had to try him and bring it into daylight that they've been holding him without charges. What ends up happening under the so-called constitutional president, Barack Obama? He gives you section 1021 under the NDAA that allows you to indefinitely detain American citizens. What ends up happening after that? Chris Hedges sues him. So what did Obama do? Obama basically legalized the illegality that Bush was doing. Under Section 1021 of the NDAA, when Hedges sued him, Judge Eileen Cannon, and people can go look this up, Eileen Cannon sided with Chris Hedges. They immediately filed an appeal, and it went up to the next level court, to the circuit court. The circuit court agreed with the Obama administration. Why did they agree with the Obama administration? Because they were already detaining American citizens without trial. They issued NSL, national security letters, to the judges to basically tell them, hey, we have something going on that is detrimental to national security. This is why this exists. And they sided with the Obama administration, and they told Chris Hedges that he had no standing because he couldn't prove it. However, you don't appeal something that you're not doing. So if I don't like chocolate ice cream, the fact that you're forcing me to, you're telling people I'm going to buy it, I'm telling you I don't like it. So in this case, I'm not going to appeal something that I have no intention of doing if I'm not already doing it. So when you look at that, and the reason that I want people to understand this is when you look at what Obama did under the NDAA, he allowed Trump to be able to now come in and use this against the American people. Obama literally voided posse comitatus, which prevents the United States military from engaging in law enforcement or any type of action within the United States. Trump now has access to be able to use the state, the red state specifically, the National Guard, and he can federalize them, or he could just literally tell the red state governors, hey, I need you guys to activate your troops, and I need you to send them to your borders. That's the border states like Texas, Arizona, and the others, right? So if he decides to federalize them now and bring the war back home, and now he's planning on doing incursions into Mexico to fight the cartels, I'm not necessarily concerned with that. Go ahead, have at it, kill away. But what are the consequences of that? What are the consequences of sending the United States military into a civilian population and lay waste to it? You're going to have Gaza 2.0. That's essentially what's going to happen, because we're not there to go and talk and fight and find peace. We're there to destroy. So by giving access to somebody like Trump, or the archetype of Trump, Obama literally set up the framework for what you see now. And they knew that this was going to happen, and they continued it. And to show you how they continued it, Biden had the ability to detract it. What did he do? He doubled down, as most recently just a couple of months ago, where he literally signed into law the ability for the US military to engage in law enforcement activities. So this is a uniparty situation. It is easy to fall for the glitter that the media tells you that, yeah, Trump is the evil Hitler, the knight of the long knives. He's going to do X, Y, and Z. Be mad at who allowed him to do it. Be mad at the people who didn't put the guardrails back on, because you have a feckless Congress that has been operating under the NDAA, continuing resolutions, and the AUMF. The authorization for use of military force allows the president of the United States to engage in unilateral actions where he can label anybody an enemy of the state. The Congress has shirked their responsibilities. So now what you are going to have happen is that now somebody like Trump, or the archetype of Trump, is able to label anybody a subversive. And they can now be detained indefinitely without trial. So it's easy to find a boogeyman. It's very, very easy to do that. What I'm not willing to do is trust the media system that has lied to us for the last 20 years, as opposed to somebody who might be trying to change things. That doesn't mean that he's benevolent. Doesn't mean that he's a good guy. Doesn't mean any of that. But what I do know is his rhetoric that he's issued prior to his election, it is consistent, and he's actually doubling down on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the episode title right there. Like everything Trump is going to do is already happening, essentially. Yeah. And I think it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse.
Worse for who? That's the key thing to say. Worse for who? Because the
like
Latin American class, the working class, they don't view
classes.
they don't view themselves as the working class. They view themselves in terms of identity. The white Hispanics who view themselves as white, they voted for Trump.
Yes.
The Hispanics who look like me and who are me because I am Latin American, Haiti is a Latin American country. I can tell you right now, there's not only a level of classism that exists, but there's also a level of colorism that exists. People like me in Haiti, Haitians that look like me, they voted for Trump. They voted for him because they view themselves as acquiescing to the alignment of power and the ability to see themselves in that class structure. They have to think like that in order to be that. And once they get that ideological framework, it's very difficult to peel them away from it. Very, very difficult. And they will vote against their own self-interest because their identity is not that of a black man or somebody who is in the same class structure as the people that he wants to have targeted. They view themselves as the higher class when that's far from the case. Far from the case, because the class that's actually in power is going to send the system down on everyone that it dislikes.
Everyone.
Fundamentally.
That's basically why I try to get like part of my platform is trying to like teach people like why capitalism and white supremacy, which was kind of born out of that, is bad for white people as well. It's going to start with the most marginalized groups of people first, and then it's going to work its way up the ladder until everyone who dissents is just an enemy of the state. And that's why I think it's going to continue to get worse, whether Trump or Harris is in power, because that's just how it works.
100%. And Chris Hedges, somebody who I fundamentally almost have one-for-one alignment with. He's like my ideological thought leader. He says it the best. He says there's a razor-thin line between the oppressed and the oppressor. Razor thin. You can see that in the Stanford prison experiment. There's a razor-thin line because people will say, you know what, it's better you than me. Or I don't believe I'm that person. My parents came here legally. Guess what? Look at me. Look at where I'm at. I'm not there where I want to be, but I'm going to get there at some point in time. That's the illusion of the American dream. And again, these people are half asleep thinking that it's actually going to happen when it's never going to happen for them for the most part. And what the system does is it platitudes the one lottery winner that says, hey, look at him. If he could make it, so can you. It doesn't function like that.
So going forward, seeing that we have to like fight the system and everything like that, I know you identify more as a conservative, I think, right?
Personally conservative. However, I have socially liberal standards. I don't even think that they're liberal. To call it that is stupid. To get people to understand, I am pro-life. I'm pro-life because of the things that I've seen. But I don't think I should tell a woman what to do with her body. So I fight it on the other end of the spectrum. Rather than tell liberals what to do or think, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the conservatives and tell them, hey, you're so pro-life. How is it that you're not trying to fund welfare? Because the number one reason that a woman gets an abortion is because she can't afford it. She can't afford the child. So why not fill welfare and make sure that they can provide? That's the number one way. If the child's life is priceless, hey, guess what? Make sure that she's got money to take care of her kid. So how you attack this problem fundamentally matters. Me trying to get you to be pro-life, I think that's a losing battle. I have my own centers of thought, and I say I'm pro-life because of my experiences. However, I think that I can make change from my side in my house before I ever try to make change outside the house. So I go to the conservative side and I tell them, listen, if you're a so-called conservative, this is how you should probably try to tackle this problem if you truly want to solve it. And for the most part with healthcare, I don't think Americans should die in the street because they can't afford healthcare. That to me is stupid. It is stupid. They're dying at home, but you're so-called protecting them from abroad from some boogeyman that you're creating. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. So it's not necessarily conservative. It's just common fucking sense.
Yeah. Well, hell yeah. I think so. We're pretty much out of time. I definitely just wanted to kind of touch grass about Trump because having a dialogue about this is like really important. And we as a self-described like leftist, I'm pretty much a black flag anarchist. You're a Republican conservative, and this is where like liberals, the liberal elite, will be like the bring in like the very debunked horseshoe theory. It's like when you go far enough left or far enough right, you end up believing in the same thing. It's like not really. It's just literally common sense stuff. And we are willing to talk about class, which liberals never. And I don't like to make generalizing statements, but they never incorporate that into their analysis. They're just like, it's racism and misogyny.
Because to talk about it would mean that they have to look in the mirror and confront themselves. And they're not willing to do that. Fundamentally not. I see these people every day in DC. Trust me, they're not willing to do that.
And so that's why, like, as I guess fascism, or when I talk to people conservative, I don't use the word fascism because it's triggering and it brings up something else. I call it tyranny. As tyranny begins to mount, I think having conversations about this is really important with people who are ideologically different from you. And I think it's always been more easy for me to talk to people who are like self-identify as conservatives or Republicans than it is to talk to about these issues hardened DNC fanatics.
100. So the reason for that, and I experienced that in Detroit, and I experienced that in Milwaukee with the DNC staff. When you get them behind closed doors, they end up saying, "You know what? You're fucking right." They don't want to do it because psychologically they function under groupthink. To think outside of the group will mean that you get ostracized. To get ostracized would mean that you face a financial consequence. You'll lose your job. So you have to think the way that they do. You just have to. It's a part of it. It's just unfortunate. But when you get them behind closed doors, they're like, you know what you said isn't really radical. It's actually happening. And I'm not saying it because I wanted to. I'm just saying that this is an objective assessment based off of the facts that I see on the ground. You see it too, but you're just not willing to confront reality. And that's where we differ. I view things from a realistic standpoint. You view things from a Pollyannish, where I want things to be, which is great. But if it's outside of the realistic metrics of being able to be achieved, you probably should think otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the Democratic Party or the people that control the interests that control the Democratic Party are going to learn from this. Instead of becoming a truly radical party to challenge what they see as a far right conservative movement, instead of appealing to their base, they're trying to appeal to a non-existent center right conservative voter who's college educated and lives in the suburbs. That's what they tried to do this last campaign, and I don't think they're going to back down because they'll never go left.
They haven't learned. I want to be clear. They have not learned their lesson. AOC could remove the pronouns all she wants. She's one of the biggest threats to the Democratic Party. And again, I say this as a Republican who don't give a shit about left-right politics at all. I view what's best for the collective good. And she is a major threat to the Democratic Party and what they want to have happened. Because if you look at her positions on Palestine, if you look at her positions on labor and what she could have actually done, she could have ground the House to a halt. And she has never once done that. She has allowed for the policies that you see before you to happen under the Democratic establishment. Because
I think
she's more comfortable with her position than she is with anything else. And by the way, when I went to Milwaukee, I'm in my plane seat. Who am I sitting right next to? Gregory Meeks, who's also my congressional representative. Okay? And I ended up telling him about Gaza. I ended up telling him about the military aspects that he could change, the things that he could do. And you know what he ended up telling me? This is not something that I think that I can change on my end. Okay? These are the cowards that we have to deal with. So there's never going to be ideological change at all until you remove the cowards from your fighting force. And they are cowards.
And I'm not sure that AOC, well, I definitely think she's a coward, but I think she's more of like an establishment plan. I think she's controlled opposition.
100% controlled opposition. If she started out as not, she is now controlled opposition, without a doubt.
I mean, look, coming to the Met Gala in an Eat the Rich dress, I knew from the start, I was like, that ain't it. Like something.
100%. That's the biggest. That was one of the biggest tells. That was one of the biggest tells. Hey, Greg, I got a hard stop because I got to go pick up my son.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope you guys.
We could close off. We could do a managed close off if you want. But I got to leave. I don't want to just end the podcast just like that. But I do have to leave at 4:30. I just saw my alert pop up.
Okay, got you. So, I mean, we're kind of at the end of the podcast time too. I really enjoyed this kind of open-ended conversation about all these aspects. Just basically giving a different read from a different perspective on what's going on within the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the Democrats as a whole. Again, I think the premise and the entire theme of this could be like everything that Trump is going to do is already happening.
100%. Again, Trump is the symptom. And I implore people, if you do anything, go listen to Chris Hudge's speeches online. Listen to them in full. There's about 3 or 4 of them. There's more than that, but there's 3 staple speeches. They're about an hour long each. And they literally tell you everything that's happened. He literally lays it out. And it's happening right before us. And if I can issue one statement, it's this. We will not cure this country. Whether you believe left, right, doesn't matter. We will not move if we don't move together. Fundamentally, there needs to be an alignment of the class structure to understand that our collective success is rooted in togetherness.
Absolutely. And as things get worse and worse, let's just try and remember that and not let COINTELPRO, which no longer exists, right? Do the government's work for them. So thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure, and hope to see you sometime soon.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All right. Yeah, take care. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening. We're going to post this post haste and see you tomorrow, actually, when we talk about the Army recruiting crisis and the implementation of the draft. Will it get people more invested in foreign wars if they have skin in the game? We'll be joined by Dennis Leitch, a former 4-star general in charge of recruitment, military recruitment. So hope to see you then. Again, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.